In the face of unparalleled adversity, the world bears witness to conflicts and humanitarian emergencies impacting millions of lives.
Affecting critical aid that is meant for millions facing hunger.
As Yemen faces the world's worst humanitarian crisis, we turn now to a major new report documenting the role that the US and Europe have played in the deaths of hundreds of civilians.
For over a decade now, you've more than likely seen a plethora of humanitarian crises throughout the media. Maybe headlines like this. How about this one? But in 2022, most certainly,
Ukraine's president has been calling on civilians to fight, appealing for help. While this assault is unfolding across Ukraine, global leaders are responding with stronger sanctions.
Just a year ago, Russia launched a military invasion of Ukraine. The aftermath has been devastating. Countless lives lost, decades of infrastructure destroyed, and hundreds of thousands sought refuge beyond the borders, leading to yet another humanitarian crisis. This conflict has engulfed the nation in a relentless wave of suffering and despair. The once thriving cities now echo with the cries of anguish as homes crumble under the weight of destruction. It's become a landscape marred by the indelible scars of war, where the simple act of survival becomes an arduous one.
The International Red Cross that arrived.
But in order to understand the full scope of how humanitarian crises impacts populations, we must first answer the question: what is a humanitarian crisis? Dr. Kushnud, a faculty member at the Yale School of Public Health and the founder of the Humanitarian Research Lab, illustrates this concept using his bucket analogy.
So first of all, when I think of a humanitarian crisis, it's often put in two big kind of buckets. One is so-called natural disasters, whether it's earthquake, whether it's droughts, whether it's floods, etc. And then the other humanitarian crisis is referred to often as human-made, which is armed conflict, genocide, etc. Some countries unfortunately go through both of them. So as you can imagine, these crises have a major impact on the health of populations. Direct impact, think of all the injuries that could happen. There's no doubt that when you go through a conflict situation, it affects your mental health as well. Also, because they no longer have access to healthcare systems, they can't get screened, tested, vaccinated. We see a rise in infectious disease. So there are those direct health effects, and then there are so-called indirect health effects, which sometimes it's not fully understood and appreciated. When you think of an armed conflict, it damages not only the health infrastructure, but it also damages the water infrastructure. Now you don't have access to your physicians, your hospitals, your clinic. There's probably going to be a short supply of your medications. We see a rise in malnutrition. They don't have access to food, clean water, hygiene. These are indirect consequences. You may die of diabetes or hypertension, and some may say, well, that's not related to armed conflict. It is. Even when conflict ends, the problems continue for health effects.
In the tapestry of global challenges, there lies a thread often overlooked and underestimated: the plight of students, like myself, caught in the crosshairs of conflict. A humanitarian crisis can also have the impact of damaging an entire country's educational system, to the extent in which a student's right to education is disrupted. In 2017, 890,000 Ukrainian citizens enrolled in full-time programs, with about 8.5% of them studying abroad, and an additional 66,000 were international students. As a result, there were about 880,000 total students enrolled that year. The percentage of international students has gradually risen since 2011, with a peak of around 83,000 students in 2018. The surge is mainly due to the high quality and affordability of their educational system. Once we dig deeper into the weeds of this population, a lesser-known narrative emerges. One community in particular that seems to be carrying the brunt of Russia's invasion.
There's only been a handful of news articles I've seen about African students and also some Indian students in Ukraine, and their ability. Many of them are not able to go back to their own country because their own country may have conflict going on or other issues.
According to the Irish Times, roughly 20% of Ukraine's foreign student population is of African descent.
A lot of the African students in Ukraine were not able to easily move to a neighboring country. Neighboring countries were welcoming Ukrainian students, but they were not welcoming African students. So there was definitely, what I noticed was inequity, both safety and educational needs of these students.
But in the midst of a humanitarian crisis, as a foreign student, what exactly do you do? How do institutions and their governments support students across borders, let alone the country they currently reside? The answer to that question is probably a little more complicated than you might think. So, what are these challenges African students face, and how are they distinctly unique?
Me, when I first entered Ukraine, I didn't too much feel this racism and everything. It's when this war started, I was living in the country without knowing with who we are living in the country, you know. So when this war started, at the beginning, I didn't want to come out from the country at the beginning. Is one of my brother, I can say big brother, who called me one morning. He was like, are you not hearing the bomb and everything? I said, yes, I do. He said, you need to come out from your place and come to this train station and everything, because we are about to leave Kharkov city, because I was living in Kharkov city. When I got there, I didn't know that I will not come back. I will not return to Ukraine again. I did not even think of that was my last day in Ukraine. So when I reached the train station, were a lot of people there, black, white, and everything. But the painful part, it was when the train came. 5 p.m. the train arrived. Everybody was just rushing and everything to enter the train. That was the worst part. I'm sure if maybe those guys, I was the only girl among those guys. I'm sure if it was just me, I won't be able to leave Ukraine. Because the pressure and then the tension was a lot, and then people were just marching on top people because they want to enter. And then at some point people was like, no, just Ukrainian people, all those black, no, you don't have the right to enter inside the train, just Ukrainian and everything. And that part was no, you don't have to enter there. That one is for Ukrainians. No, you need to sit on the ground. All this kind of thing. And some people was like, we all are running from the same thing. We all are running from the same thing. It's not like because you are Ukrainian, we are black, or you are white. When they are sending the bomb, is only for one particular people that are sending the bomb. The bomb is for the whole country, and then every person inside that country is affected. Not only you, Ukrainian people. At some point we have to fight to enter inside one room to get place, at least to sit down. Even though we cannot, at least to sit down. Other people was like, no, there's Ukrainian woman we kill that. No, you need to stand up for her to sit down. She buy ticket. You buy ticket, but this is not your room. Yes, you buy ticket, but this room is not your room. Go forward. No, you need to stand up because I'm Ukrainian and everything. People was like, it's like you people don't know what you are talking about, or people don't even realize what is really going on. When we reached in Lviv, till now we just say thank God because we reached to Lviv. But when we took one driver, we need to cross the border, we have to walk 12 hours before we reach. the border. Like me, in my condition now, because I have a head problem, my two legs, like at some point in my mind was I cannot make it, because even 1/4 of the hours I cannot make it, because I know my condition. All the boss was like, you need to try, because nobody can carry anybody in this journey. Nobody. I say, okay, no problem. Like, we started a journey. The journey was so hard. Like, what I mean hard, it was so hard. No water, no food. Like, we were like inside the jungle, fighting for our life, to survive, actually, if I can say it like that, just to survive. So when we reached in Poland border, that was the worst part. No black have the right to cross the border, only Ukrainian. Like, as we spent like 3 days standing, like standing inside the cold, inside the snow. We stayed outside, like inside the cold. It's not like the place was like covered with something. Snow, inside the snow. We no food, no anything, just because in all we were hearing is like only Ukrainian women and children supposed to pass. All the rest we have to go back and everything. Like,
if you like, we can talk about something else.
yeah.
So if you like, we can talk about something else.
Yes, it's better.
Yeah. Can I order in?
One of the days in February, I can't remember the exact date, but ending of February, the Polish border guards came to my house. They came for one person because we are all students staying in their apartment. They came for one person, but when they came for me, they asked, "Oh, are you staying alone?" And he said, "No, he's not staying alone. He's staying with his fellow students." That was how they asked for all of us to bring our international passports. After they checked the passports, they said that we have been detained, and the detaining process has started immediately. And so we have to switch off our phones and follow them to the station. So we followed them to the station. This was around 1 p.m. But before we left, we called the school. And the Polish border guards also told the school authorities where they were taking us to. And between the time they called the school and the time they left my house, it was about 45 minutes. But I think what was provoking about the whole situation is that between that time, the school did not show up. Even though the school knew what was happening. Of course, the school is responsible for all her students here. We got to the Polish border guard office. We were told to fill certain forms. Some of these forms were actually in Polish language. And we did not know what it meant, but we had no option than to just fill it, because there was one of the forms that said that whether we fill it or not, someone will fill it for us. And he said that all of us are illegal in Poland, that we shouldn't have stepped into the territory of Poland without a visa, that was our crime. And that crime is punishable by law. Around 10 p.m., they took us to a prison, and all of us we were 4 that were carried. So we were detained, we were locked up, we were treated like criminals, we were handcuffed, our pictures were being taken. We cried surprise because we knew that we did not commit any crime. This was just, we were in our houses and you just came and you picked us up. So when we came out, we had to go to school. We told the school about it. The school acted surprised as if they did not know where we were, although they knew where we were actually. Because we also have Ukrainian students. They think that the Polish border guards move from house to house. So this day they just came to my house, and we are actually the first set of students they visited.
Okay. But so are there other white students in Poland with you guys as well?
Yes, Ukrainian students, yes, they are.
Okay.
Have they been visited? They haven't been visited.
Can you tell me a little bit about because most people here in Germany wanted to enroll in school, right?
Yeah.
And there's all these different requirements and different barriers to getting access to universities here. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so this is where we really see the difference again. And to be honest, like being black, like I mentioned before, I've never really known what it means like to be black, but here in Germany, I really had that idea. It was really clear what it means like to be black. I really understood. You kind of felt so separated, and you look at the system and you look at the things, you don't understand why. I still don't understand why, because they don't give us access to education before and everything. For example, now in Germany, for you to study, there's a lot of requirements which you have to go through, and the rest, which was made very easy for Ukrainians to get into the system to continue with their studies. But for third country nationals, we had to go through those requirements. It's like you're getting admission back from, let's say, if you're home, you have to provide all those requirements, everything. And one of the major things is in Germany is, for example, in the bachelor's level, most of the programs are being taught in German, and if you want to apply, first of all, if you have the interest, that means you need to speak German. And most schools will ask you are required to have C1, right? Which can take like a year and a half, So now you want to get back to school, but then you need to have C1. How long does it take you to have a C1? You don't have support from the government. At this point, most people didn't have what we have now, fiction. You couldn't work. So how are you really going to do it? You're still, moving up and down with the housing thing from one place to another, sleeping in the Vauxhall and whatever. You just move from one place to another, which is still happening up to now. There's really been no support for people of color. You try to go here, they tell you need this. They ask for documents which you don't have at all, or they tell you you're not eligible at all to, for the job center to help you. You don't have a permit or this and that. And it made things very difficult for us, It's still making things very difficult. A lot of people don't have the fiction. And even if you went to the job center, they'll still tell you it's not really enough.
So for Ukrainians, did they have to have the language and the block account?
Ukrainians don't need, first of all, with Ukrainians, they have access to housing, straight away, the government is giving them allowance, access to school, they don't need any block account, it's just straight in, you just get admission, or maybe you can learn the language course if you want, you can take your time, they have the permit, but we don't have that option, we didn't have that option at all. The block account is there, even if you want to study, it's still there, it's not been lifted. And it's been a challenge. It's still been a challenge for most people who want to study in Germany, and it's still ongoing. Getting the C1 language, which takes a year, and you've lost a year already in the war. You have to take another year and a half to learn the language, and you have to come up with the block account.
The bombs do not discriminate. The bomb didn't say, you are a white person, I will kill you. You are a black person, so you must die. I tell you people, we both got it in equal measures.
Abuse, humiliation, prejudices, and discrimination seem to be a common theme among Africans. The experience of being denied entry to trains and buses that would transport them to neighboring countries were consistent across media reports. While escaping the country, some were even told by Ukrainian border guards that the policy was 10
number of the Ukrainian locals to one number of foreigners to gain entrance to the Polish border.
These roadblocks, stemming from deeply ingrained systematic racism, add yet another layer of complexity to an already challenging situation. But discrimination didn't quite end there. Displaced African students that made it past the border experienced political discrimination. While Ukrainian refugees were allowed to enter neighboring countries, European politicians used anti-migration laws to refuse entry for non-Europeans. We can go as far as to even say that the experiences of the impacts of war, discrimination, and trauma have also contributed to adverse mental health outcomes. This isn't the first time the world has witnessed conflict between Ukraine and Russia. In fact, they've been in conflict for the last decade. In March of 2014, following Ukraine's Revolution of Dignity, anti-revolution and pro-Russian protests began in Ukraine's Luhansk Oblast and Donetsk.
It's the first city that was attacked by the war.
Dr. Langdon, you studied medicine in Ukraine. You were able to earn your degree, but still haven't found success as it relates to retrieving that academic transcript. Do you mind kind of relaying what that experience has been like up until this point?
So somewhere last year, I got a contact in Ukraine who said he could help me out and requested I pay about $3,500 before he can get the transcripts for me. And I needed the transcript so badly because I had applied for my master's in speech and language pathology. And so I was willing to pay whatever I could to get the transcript. And as we speak, I still haven't been able to get hold of the transcript. When the Russians took over that city, most of the workers there in the school were Ukrainian. So they didn't want anything to do with the Russians. Some had to move to other cities. So the school became non-existent. So actually the medical students that were in school at that period of time had to move to other cities. They claim they have our documents in a room that has been locked up. That's what I've been told. But I don't know. I think it's under the Russians now. So you have to go through Russia to be able to get access to it because it's now a Russian territory. And no Ukrainian wants to sacrifice his or herself to go there, to go for chasing your documents. So that is the problem.
Dr. Langdon now practices in Ghana, her home country. But because her transcripts weren't electronically integrated into Ukraine's system and are still physically in Ukraine, she has no proof of graduating and can't continue on in her education in a different institution. So you finished your medical degree in what year again?
In 2013.
So it's been 10 years that you...
Yeah.
Wow.
10 years.
At the very least, it's important to understand that these issues don't reside in any particular country or continent. African governments and institutions have to also help push that needle in terms of what is the norm in protecting citizens across borders.
When you see, the way they treat us sometimes outside and what we're going through, and then your country is still treating you the same kind of way, that's sometimes I don't really understand. Like, if it's like, okay, I'm like, the way these people are treating me, sometimes it's like, okay, it's okay. Like, if my own country cannot take responsibility for, or help, or like kind of advocate or do anything. Sometimes I ask the question, like, why would the German government want to help? Of course, if I don't have that respect, come back from home, because there's a lot they could do. I think if all African countries or the summit or whatever, if they really came together with the embassies and spoke with the German government or, diplomatic mission, hey, we have students, and these are students from Ukraine. But these are students and people who had families already or businesses, they're just trying to continue with the education. I don't know if they had those talks before or whatever, but if they really came together and had a meeting, and I wish they did this kind of thing, I think somehow someone would have listened at least. For example, a lot of students are going to be like, why would I go back to Nigeria? Or Cameroon, I was in this mess before, and let's say, of course, they happen to be like, they make it in life or anything. Why would they want to go back and help you as a country? Like, if you're not trying to support me or a youth, would you say I'm leader of tomorrow? And then I'm in this mess, but you cannot really do anything, or you're not willing to do anything.
Although African student refugees have been disproportionately affected, there are solutions in the making that are beginning to emerge.
We never come down when we stay up. We never come down when we stay up. We never come down when we stay up. We never come down when we stay up.
New tonight, Metro Atlanta residents are overseas right now helping people of African descent to escape the war in Ukraine.
This after videos surfaced of many people of color being mistreated and denied access at the border.
Two Mercer alumni who are now in grad school are trying to help in the Ukraine crisis. They're getting African college students safely out of the war-torn country.
This is Nassim Ashford, a student at the Yale School of Public Health. He, alongside Masiri Erbout, co-founded Nor United International.
Many of these students are on the verge of homelessness if they don't get any kind of support.
They helped to raise over $125,000 in humanitarian support and coordinated the evacuation of 41 students from Kherson, Ukraine. They promote humanitarian equity, ensuring that all individuals affected by the crisis have the resources they need to rebuild their lives.
Our organization was founded in 2020 in response to the George Floyd protests and the renewed interest in the Black Lives Matter movement and social justice for marginalized communities. However, for the last year, we've been supporting African students that fled the war from Ukraine, students and families. Our organization has been striving to do is one, provide them with legal assistance, and this encompasses helping them pay for legal fees so that they can maintain or get their temporary residence permit. We also work with humanitarian assistance, providing food, housing, material assistance. And then lastly, we do work with the large population of students. And so we've worked and secured funding for scholarships. We had a scholarship that was opened up in January and ended in February. And since then, we've been able to award 50 students with scholarships ranging from $500 to $1,000 scholarships. The main thing that we've been focusing on is humanitarian equity. In the beginning of this crisis, there were a lot of conversations surrounding funding and the amount of funding that was going to Ukraine as opposed to other humanitarian crises that were happening at the same time. In looking at this, we somewhat found a niche to see, okay, there's a lot of resources that are going to a particular community, mainly Ukrainian communities. But as we know, people who live within countries that may or may not be nationals or citizens per se, but they're still active members of those particular communities. And so we focused on humanitarian equity in the beginning, trying to scope the landscape to see, well, how many students, how many people who are third country nationals. And to say this, third country nationals or just anyone who is not a citizen, it's a term that's used in the humanitarian space to describe them. And so when I say third country nationals, we're talking about African students, Southeast Asian students, we're talking about families, we're talking about people from the Middle East, really from all over the world, just if they're not a citizen. And so we were looking at how that impacted their lives. And then from there, we started to see that there was a really big pressing concern for mental health. Having faced the trauma of war already brings PTSD, depression, anxiety, but then having the double burden of the trauma of war and racism and discrimination on top really puts this particular community in a more stressed situation. And so our focus began to see, well, how can these people who have, one, been the hope for their community, the hope for their country, how can they recoup themselves after going through this experience if they have all of these mental health issues that they're currently facing?
Join forces with organizations like Nor United to shape a future where unity and collaboration thrive, empowering them to forge a more just and inclusive world on their terms.
In order for us to see the world that we want to be in tomorrow, it's time for us to come back together again. It's time for us to have these conversations and work hand in hand to see how we can work on different solutions to benefit the community. And when I say solutions, I mean things that are tangible, things that are sustainable, things that are long lasting. We have all the answers that we need. We have brilliant people, brilliant minds with many different ideas. It's time to, not just focus on your one thing, but to focus on the thing that helps the collective and what helps all of us to see a better future for tomorrow. It's not just about us, but it's about the world. And something that our organization really likes to, in our framework and thinking about this, is if you're able to help one of the most marginalized people, you're able to help everyone, because that marginalized person is facing many different barriers that impede them from going on and having successful lives. You remove those barriers, you're removing the barriers for everybody, not just for that one person.
an African way. Feel the rise deep in your vein. Damn right, I'm an African way. And when we fall, we never give up. We go ride like an African way. So make the beat go. Wicked.